Hi guys. I hope everyone had a great April break. I am here to remind you of your old friend, the Province Stat notebook that we had in class. I hope everyone has theirs at home. Hopefully you already watched the first video and you have a little bit of an understanding of a observational study versus an experimental study. So after watching that video, we're going to take some notes and we're going to get back into this notebook. So I'm going to open up to my next open page and I am going to title this page Types of Studies. All right, so the first type of study that we looked at in that video is the observational study. So the observational study now that is when you do not change anything about what people are doing. You merely just watch what they are doing. So you do not change anything. What you can do is you can just watch, make observations, and ask questions. So now, observational study, I believe in the video they talked about looking at driving patterns. And in that case, you might look at Google Maps, see where there's traffic, something like that. Another type of subset of observational study is a sample survey. So you can conduct a survey, and that is a type of observational study. So one key part of a survey is that you must ask unbiased questions. And we will get into what types of biases there are next week. But for right now, you just have to make sure that you're asking questions that do not have any sort of bias, which would force people to answer one way or another. So you have a survey, and then the other type of study that you learned from that video is your randomized experiment. So you have your experimental study. So this one I wanted to talk a little bit more about because you will have different vocab within this experimental study. So for one, you always have a control group and you have an experimental group. So this is where your control group, you're keeping everything the same. In the video, that would be the group of people that they said to not change anything about their nightly routine. In your experimental group, that's where you enact change. So control, everyone stay normal. In your experimental group, the researcher enacts change. So the change that was enacted on those people in the video, they were asked to walk, I believe, a mile every night. So that's the change that the experiment caused. So you are trying to, in a randomized experiment, you're trying to prove cause and effect. And that is the biggest importance of an experiment. You can prove cause and effect in an experiment. You cannot prove cause and effect in an observation. You're just looking at trends in an observation. So there are two really important types of variables in an experimental study. And you guys have heard these words before. You have the explanatory variable, and you have your response variable. So for example, you could have an explanatory variable, which might be your activity level. Your response variable might be your weight. So you could look at increasing people's activity levels and seeing how that affects their weight. There are two other different variables that have effects in experimental studies, and those are called your confounding variable and your lurking variable. Now, your confounding variable is something that you know of that could also affect the response. So if you have an explanatory variable of activity level and you have a response variable of weight, a confounding variable might be something like age. So how old you are might affect how your activity level affects your weight. So this is a known variable that affects the results. And your lurking variable is the unknown variable that could also affect the results. So something that could be an unknown variable affecting your results of activity level versus weight could be something like a thyroid activity level. So you can have a hyperactive thyroid or I believe it's called a hypoactive thyroid. And that could also have an effect on how your activity level affects your weight. So these are your basic types of studies. And one thing that's added compared to the first video you watched is that a specific type of observational study is a survey. And one thing that's super important is that you can prove cause and effect in experimental studies. You cannot prove it in observational studies.